Welcome back, folks. I'm Jake Ellenbogen, and today we're going to be talking about the linebackers because I think there needs to be a little bit of a deep dive into the linebackers, not just the linebackers that are available, but just a reminder of who the Rams are. I'm seeing a lot of comments that people don't even understand what's going on with the linebackers, but I went through and it'll make more sense, I can assure you, after I explain. Before we dive into it, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Also, be sure to follow me on all social media at JKBogey, including Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Kick. And in addition to that, just want to let you guys know that you can check out my brand new interview with Cam Curl, who is the starting safety or one of the starting safeties for the Los Angeles Rams. I had a great interview with him. So if you want to learn about his whole, NFL journey, his journey throughout college and at Arkansas, and how much he's enjoying being a Ram and so forth, be sure to definitely check that out over on the Lounge. It will also be reposted on this channel next week. So be sure to check that out. Again, if you're a Rams fan, I would assume you are if you're watching this video. So anyway, Rams linebackers. I've done a whole deep dive on this. And I just want to remind people, for people that are hoping that the Rams are going to sign somebody, look, I am too, but be honest here. Be honest with yourselves. After this video, you should not think that. Let's get started here because everybody's asking, well, Jake, Roseboom signed and Hummel signed elsewhere. What's the Rams' plan? They only have 3 linebackers on this roster currently. We're talking about right now Omar Speights. We're talking about Tony Fields II, and we're talking about Elias Neal. And of those 3, only one of them was drafted. Tony Fields II was drafted in the 5th round. So, what does this look like? What's the thought process here? Like, are we going to see Tony Fields II? Are we going to see Elias Neal, who actually made the initial 53-man roster? Like, what are we doing here? And, all fair questions. I'll get to that. Just want to, remind you guys, let's go back. Sean McVay became the head coach in 2017. I have a list here of all the linebackers since that have been on the 53-man roster since. So in 2017, the Rams had Alec Ogletree, Mark Barron, Cameron Lynch. Hey, Cameron Lynch. Yeah, my guy. Bryce Hager and Corey Littleton. Okay. 2018, Corey Littleton, Mark Barron, Rameek Wilson, Bryce Hager, Micah Kiser. 2019, Corey Littleton, Clay Matthews, Kenny Young, Troy Reeder, Natrez Patrick, Bryce Hager, Traven Howard, and Cameron Lynch. 2020, Troy Reeder, Kenny Young, Micah Kiser, Natrez Patrick, Derek Moncrief. 2021, the Super Bowl season, Troy Reeder, Kenny Young, who was traded away during the season, Traven Howard, Ernest Jones, Christian Roseboom. 2022, Ernest Jones, Bobby Wagner, Traven Howard, Jake Gervais, and Christian Roseboom. 2023, Ernest Jones, Christian Roseboom, Troy Reeder, Jake Hummel, Olakunle Fadukasi. 2024, Christian Roseboom, Omar Speights, Troy Reeder, Jake Hummel, Elias Neal, and now in 2025, Omar Speights, Elias Neal, and Tony Fields II. So, why did I bring that up? Well, I found it really interesting because when I was going through, because I like doing my research, I actually came across the fact that the Rams, they really value UDFAs. Like, we knew that, but it was kind of cool to see it. And in case you didn't know, because every team has their own flavor. Nobody does things the exact same as other teams. Everybody has their own opinions and their own philosophies and ideologies. And when you look at the Rams, despite that 1 year they paid Bobby Wagner, they just don't really care about spending premium capital in linebackers. Now, you probably already knew that, but 2017, the UDFAs were Corey Littleton and Cam Lynch. 2018 was Corey Littleton. 2019 was Corey Littleton, Natrez Patrick, Cameron Lynch, and Troy Reeder. 2020 was Troy Reeder, Natrez Patrick, and Derek Moncrief. 2021 was Troy Reeder and Christian Roseboom. 2022 was Jake Gervais and Christian Roseboom. 2023, Christian Roseboom, Troy Reeder, Jake Hummel, Olakunle Fadukasi. 2024, Christian Roseboom, Omar Spades, Troy Reeder, Jake Hummel, Elias Neal. And 2025, Omar Spades, Elias Neal, and question mark. So why do I bring this up? I bring it up because of this. The Rams look at this position as a position that they can get the most value, the most bang for their buck if they go via UDFA to fill out that room. Now, as far as starters go, Barwin was one of them. Although, he pretty much he played on the outside. But Alec Ogletree and Mark Barron, right? Barwin was more of an edge. So Alec Ogletree and Mark Barron. Barron was a converted safety. Ogletree was a former first-round pick, and so was Mark Barron, who they traded for the previous year, I believe, or 2 years before, from the Bucks, right? Cam was a undrafted free agent at Syracuse. You guys know Cameron Lynch. Corey Littleton was an undrafted rookie free agent out of Washington, converted, defensive back to linebacker, also rushed the passer. And fun fact, was still trying to complete his graduation process during the offseason, so he got the opposite of a head start. Bryce Hager was a 7th-round pick out of Baylor. So you look at this, and on 2017's roster, you have a first-round pick, and a 7th-round pick. And then 2018, Ramik Wilson was a free agency acquisition. Corey Littleton, again, UDFA. Mark Barron, a former first-round pick by the Bucks. Micah Kaiser ends up going in the 5th round. Bryce Hager, 7th-round pick. In 2019, Littleton, UDFA. Clay Matthews, a former first-round pick. Of course, everybody knows him. Was a free agency acquisition. Kenny Young was a trade acquisition. Of course, he was drafted by the Ravens. Trade acquisition for the trade of Marcus Peters. Troy Reeder was a UDFA that year out of Delaware. Natrez Patrick was a UDFA out of, I believe, Georgia. Bryce Hager, 7th-round pick. Traven Howard, 7th-round pick. And Cam Lynch, UDFA. 2020, right? Kaiser, 5th-round pick. Kenny Young was drafted. The rest are UDFAs. 2021, by the way, 2020 was like their best year. You could argue that was the best defense that we've ever seen for the Rams since probably the fearsome foursome era. So look at that. The best year, and you're talking about Reeder, Young, Kaiser, Patrick, and Moncrief. Those were their linebackers. They feel like they have a system here. The year they won the Super Bowl, they drafted Ernest Jones, 3rd round, which is, by the way, the highest pick for a linebacker that they had made since Alec Ogletree in, I believe, 2012. So you have Ernest Jones, and then, Traven Howard, the 7th-round pick. Kenny Young was drafted, but you traded for him, right? So Troy Reeder and Roseboom are UDFAs. 2022, you got Bobby Wagner, who was a 2nd-round pick that the Rams wanted, and Seattle took him. They passed on him. That whole thing, there's a whole thing there. Anyway, Bobby Wagner, 2nd-round pick. Ernest Jones, 3rd-round pick from you. 7th-round pick, Traven Howard. The rest UDFAs. 2023, now we're talking Ernest Jones is the only one drafted. And then 2024, nobody was drafted. Tony Fields, the 2nd, of course, was on their practice squad. So they really don't spend a lot of draft capital on linebackers. They just don't. Now, I know that they've added guys in the past that are kind of like the hybrid linebacker, like a Trayvon Young from Louisville. More of an edge defender, though. And Nick Hampton from App State could play off ball, but more of an edge. Although that is an option, too, if they want to move Nick Hampton to off ball. I don't think they will, but that is an option. Anyway, point being, you have arguably the best linebacker starting group that they had was in 2022, Ernest Jones and Bobby Wagner. And I say arguably, I think it's pretty obvious. I mean, it's great as, Corey Littleton was. Littleton never played with anybody as good as Bobby Wagner and maybe even Ernest Jones. Littleton was awesome, though. But Ernest Jones and Bobby Wagner, for not the fault of their own, that was the best starting group they've had at linebacker in the Sean McVay era, and they went 5-12. And then again, like I said, the best defense, they had Troy Reeder and Kenny Young and Micah Kaiser, who went down. Like, that's kind of what we're getting at. So you could say the Rams has shown time and time again they can win without top linebackers. Whether that was their fault or not in 2022, it does have kind of that optic feel to it. Keep in mind, they won a Super Bowl with Troy Reeder alongside Ernest Jones. And it's worth mentioning that Traven Howard and Troy Reeder dominated the snaps and had the lion's share of the snaps early on in the postseason. Ernest Jones got going. I believe he was banged up a little bit, and he started to get more and more playing time as a rookie and then actually dominated the snaps in the Super Bowl. Here's my thing. I want to be honest here, because I agree with you. I would like to see a move. I'd like to see them add somebody at linebacker. We were talking about Jamie Sherwood, mentioned how Dre Greenlaw seemed like a perfect fit. But you know what? I understand why they might not. Now, doesn't mean I don't think that they should go after an EJ Speed or a CJ Mosley or an Eric Kendricks or even Jack Gibbons, who's coming off an injury, would likely not be able to play until, probably like week 4. I don't know, maybe he'll be ready, but he did suffer a pretty gruesome ankle injury. So anyway, point being, Omar Speights. So I just got done watching a ton of Omar Speights film. And Speights can be LB1. I feel very confident in saying that. See, the thing about Omar Speights is that he's already probably a top 12 run defender at linebacker. He had the 5th lowest missed tackle percentage among all starting linebackers that play at least 50% of the snaps from week 8 to the end of the divisional round. So this is a guy that got better and better each week. 15th overall PFF grade in that span, 10th PFF grade in run defense, 5th in PFF tackling. He just became a really stout run defender. And more importantly, he wasn't really, they weren't breaking his tackle. Like, this is a guy that makes sure, and if he doesn't have a great grip, he holds up long enough to get that gang tackle, which isn't a missed tackle. So he's becoming a stout run defender. He's improving in coverage, although that is his liability, I think, at that point. And I don't want to call him a liability there. I think that's just his weakness. But, he has flashes in coverage for sure. He had some good plays on tape. And the Saints, I want to bring this up. The Saints game, week 13, he was rated the top linebacker per PFF that week. And if you watch the tape, you can see why. 7 defensive stops. He just looked incredible. Just really well, really sound football player, smart. He doesn't get off his blocks like crazy. Like, he's not a block shedder so much as he is somebody that can get around, can use his quickness. I think the Rams have a type. As of late, it just feels like they want more of that quick, nimble linebacker that is just going to get around blocks instead of run right through them. And as much as I would like to see a block shedder, and I think you could, it just feels like the Rams, like that guy that's like a 6'2", 6'1", really compact, 230 pound, maybe even undersized. Beyond that. But Speights, you could argue, yeah, he's undersized. I watched that film, and I was just sitting there like, I don't know how this guy wasn't drafted. I genuinely don't. But there are a lot of guys like that slip through the cracks. Speights just played at LSU, which is why it's so puzzling to me. He played in the SEC. He played a big-time program like LSU. I just don't know how he fell through the cracks. But, regardless, the Rams feel really good about him. Sean McVay loves him. I think that has a lot to do with why they haven't been as aggressive in free agency for linebacker, because I think first and foremost, he is their LB1. But I think they should add another one because I think they should add a guy to complement him. And I think when you look at the linebackers, maybe Eric Kendricks doesn't make the most sense, although he played very well. But they need a guy that's going to be able to complement him in the coverage aspect, okay? You can't just have two, run defenders and have liabilities in coverage. And that's the problem. The Rams have had that. Roseboom's gotten better, but he and Reeder are not the best in coverage. So when you have them on the field at the same time like they did to start the season, that's when teams can start picking you apart when you're dropping back in coverage. Bobby Wagner and Ernest Jones, both guys. Ernest Jones, not the best in coverage, although he did get better. Bobby Wagner, all of a sudden, is great in coverage again. He really wasn't the best at that point in his career, and then he had a resurgence this past year. Kenny Young was good in coverage. Traven Howard was a former defensive back, good in coverage. Jake Gervais, former safety at Iowa, good in coverage, They've had guys like that. Corey Littleton, really good in coverage. Kaiser, not so much, really good against the run. So they've had different guys. Of course, Mark Barron, safety background. So in Sean McVay's tenure, they've had a bunch of converts from safety. I mean, you talk about Littleton, Barron, Gervais, Traven Howard, guys with defensive background. So it makes you wonder if they will ever go back to that because they haven't had that in a minute now. To be fair, Traven Howard was the last one, 2022, but I think it's worth, keeping it on. There are some guys in this draft that you would call linebacker, safety converts or whatever. So let's talk about who's available right now. I mentioned them in passing, but EJ Speed, you look at him, taller guy out of Tarleton State, has really had a nice career with the Colts. He's still available. He's 29 years old, good speed, really good athleticism. Obviously, you have to have that to get drafted out of Tarleton State. But I think he could be a fit for the Rams. I mean, this is a guy that can blitz and really help you as a rusher in those sub packages. He can obviously help you in coverage, really good athlete, and he's good against the run. Not really going to be a block deconstructor, but more so a guy that can get around his block. Does he fit what they look for typically? Not really. 6'4", like I said, a little taller, but, he'd make some sense. CJ Mosley, to me, is the best fit. Mosley, you get a leader. You get a guy that can play downhill. You can drop into coverage. 2023, he was one of the best linebackers in football. 2024, he suffers 2 injuries, and they're not good. A toe injury that could linger, and a neck injury. Now, if he clears, and the Jets did just release him, I would be all for adding CJ Mosley to the roster. So that's somebody to keep an eye on. Eric Kendricks, not as good in coverage as he used to be, but really good against the run. Had a good year in Dallas, despite what people want to say about him being washed. Like he and Mosley are not washed at all. They're both very good. So he is an option. Then Jack Gibbons out of the Titans organization. Season-ending ankle injury, unfortunately for him. But this is a guy that started 4 games. And 3 of those 4 starts, the last one being the one that he got hurt in, 3 of the 4 starts where he started the entire game, he was one of the top, players at his position for that span. Now, I understand that is kind of being that's really a small sample size, right? But just looking at it, 3rd overall among all linebackers, according to PFF, in overall grade, 4th in run defense, tied for 5th in coverage with Fred Warner. I think you might have something there. He didn't test extremely well coming out of the draft out of Minnesota, but he plays faster than his tape. And this is why I always say we can talk about the combine and measurables all we want, but guys just sometimes, or a lot of the times, just play faster, on tape than they run. But there are also guys that run faster than they do on tape. And I think there's a reason for that. I think a lot of the play speed comes down to your confidence. It comes down to adrenaline. But it really comes down to, not having to think, just react, just have instincts, right? And being an instinctive player and having the speed of the game down, you don't have to sit there and you play your game. You're not thinking. When you're thinking, you're not able to play at 100%. There's just no way. Football is way too quick to think. You just have to do. You have to know, right? When you're constantly sitting there trying to be, you can't be decisive, that's an issue. Jack Gibbons, however, that guy can drop into coverage. He can play the run. He's got some good stuff. I like him. I think he's a good player. We'll see how his injury checks out. If it were me, I would sign him. I'd probably draft 2 linebackers in this draft. I'd probably sign Gibbons, or I would sign CJ Mosley. I think those are the 2 best fits for the Rams. Gibbons, of course, being more of he's 26. He's got some, really good tape in the 3 starts that he made last year. Kind of reminds me of Corey Littleton, where you see it in 2017. Ogletree goes down. Littleton has to step up and does, and has a massive role the next year and the year after that. The Rams don't typically pay linebackers, and Gibbons just seems like he'd be cheap enough where, also because of the injury, he might not sign until post June 1st, where you get that $15 million freed by the Cooper Kupp deal. So I think it's worth a shot. I definitely think it's worth, checking in on. But then you have the NFL draft. Okay. And here's a list of guys, and I could keep going. I honestly really like this linebacker class. But here's a list of linebackers that I just watched, and I'm starting to understand why, on one hand, yes, it'd be nice to sign these guys. On the other, this linebacker draft is deep. So let's start with this. Number 1 for me, and I don't want to go totally in order, but number 1 would definitely be Jahad Campbell. Now, the Rams, like I just got over mentioning, haven't drafted a linebacker in the first round since Alec Ogletree. But if they're going to draft one in the first round this year, Jahad Campbell at 26 wouldn't be a bad bet. Campbell's got massive upside. He's an elite athlete. He's good at pretty much everything, whether it's rushing the passer, whether it's dropping into coverage, or, playing the run. I want to see him get, some more strength where he can get off his blocks, but you look at just the short area quickness and the burst and, how explosive he is, the closing speed. This guy is a freak. And his coverage ability would just complement Omar Spades perfectly. Like, I think it just adds a whole other dynamic to this defense that we just haven't seen. And I understand the Rams have a system and it works, but if they do draft Jahad Campbell, I don't know where this defense is going, but they were so good last year. If they could get Campbell in there, I feel really good about their chances of maybe being a top 5 defense this season. Now, number 2 is Demetrius Knight Jr. out of South Carolina. A lot of you guys have been blowing up my comments section, and it was so funny. I made a joke about this. I know you're going to end up watching this, Father, but my dad texted me. He's like, "What do you think about Demetrius Knight Jr.?" And I said, "Wow, you sound like my YouTube comment section." Look, like this guy a lot. He's one of the oldest players in the draft. So understandably so, if the Rams do go after somebody like that, it does make a lot of sense for them since that's what they've been doing. But it's a linebacker, so that's 4 years. He'll be about 29 years of age when he hits free agency. I don't expect this to be a long-term deal or an extension. But if they're looking for 4 years of a guy that can play really high-quality football at linebacker, Demetrius Knight Jr. is your guy. I mean, very well-rounded, great athlete. He's got some crazy closing speed. Help you in coverage. I just think he kind of does it all. And so, Jahad Campbell is 26 or bust, I think. You really are only going to get him there. You might even have to trade up if you want him. Demetrius Knight Jr. to me is if you trade down, you could get him in the second round. But because of his age, he might fall to the third. You might be able to be lucky enough for him to fall to the third. It's a really good linebacker draft, in my opinion. I've never found so many linebackers immediately that just smacked me in the face like, wow, I really like these guys. So then next up, Smile Mondon from Georgia, elite athlete, can do everything, but he's an absolute beast in coverage. That is, to me, where he excels. Now, when I say he could do everything, I'm not saying he's elite at everything, but I'm saying most of these guys just can do it all, right? But Mondon from Georgia was really impressive in coverage. He could just turn and like, that's the thing, the hips, he's so fluid. I think he is a great fit for the Rams, just like the other two I mentioned. Next up, Carson Schlesinger from UCLA. Dude is so athletic. He has this quick trigger where, like, right immediately off the snap, you'll see some guys kind of like they lag behind a little bit. They test things out. Not him. This dude is just the rock and roller coaster. If you've ever been on it, 0 to 60 almost immediately, right? Which I love. He can do it all. I thought he really showed up and showed out in that game. I believe it was against Rutgers. You see it in coverage, the upside. I was just really impressed with, his ability. I don't think it was Rutgers now. Totally blanking on the one where Raiola is from. I'm going to look it up right now. Dominic Raiola. No, Nebraska. I knew it was a red team. Anyway, play in Nebraska. I watched Schlesinger play against Nebraska, and I'm not saying Raiola is Patrick Mahomes or he's a superstar or anything. He's only 19. I know the memes there. But watching him in coverage, like, that game really stood out to me. Like, how he was able to really close, on a few passes where, Raiola could have really thrown a missile. Instead, he kind of, lobbed it a little bit. But you're not expecting Carson to get there. And then he goes and he bats it away, and you're like, wow, okay, he's got some range. And then you see him play the run. And what I'm most impressed about is, while he can play the run and he can play the pass, the thing Carson does that kind of separates him is that he is so good as a rusher. Okay, so not only do you have that quick trigger, but you can also rush the passer. And I could ask you to, rush off the edge, or I could ask you to blitz. And the Rams, while they didn't use that a ton this year with Roseboom and Omar Speights, although they did let Omar Speights, turn loose against the Eagles in that last game, and he forced a fumble. Of course, they recovered, but they forced a fumble on Jalen Hurts. I think they want to add more of that, right? I think they want to add more of that to the defense, and I think Carson could add that for sure. I think day one, Campbell is starting next to Omar Speights. Knight is starting next to Omar Speights. Mondon is starting next to Omar Speights. Schlesinger is starting next to Omar Speights. And then this next guy would absolutely, Chris Paul Jr., who actually in some aspects intrigues me the most, because he's an elite athlete. He's very instinctive. He's very smart. I watched his interview with Brett Coleman on Bootleg Football, and I was just so impressed with just his knowledge of the game, but also how he's a guy that can do it all. And I watched the 2023 tape, and this is a guy that seems like he has like kind of issues with his strength, and he tries to shed blocks, but it doesn't work out. And then 2024, all of a sudden, he's shedding blocks. So I think this guy can do everything. I think he's kind of the sleeper. I think he's the sleeper LB2, because Jalen Walker just provides way too much to not be the number one linebacker. But I really like Chris Paul Jr.'s game out of Ole Miss. I think he is a perfect fit for the Rams. And I don't know, man. It's going to be tough. Like I said, I don't normally watch this many linebackers and have this many guys that stand out to me. But this draft, for whatever reason, has a lot of linebackers that do the things that I'm looking for. And if you're looking to complement Omar Speights, and again, it's not to say that he can't play in coverage, but if you're looking to complement him, you have to add somebody that can help you in coverage. And that's something Chris Paul Jr. is going to do. But he's also going to add block shedding and like true block deconstruction that is not currently evident on the roster. Omar is a guy that, quicker, nimble. He gets hit with a block, kind of can, get out of the way or kind of get off it, disengage, but he's not going to just absolutely just deconstruct you. Like, he's not going to tear you down in that blocking game. Whereas I watch Chris Paul Jr. looks like he is a defensive lineman in the middle of the trenches, the way he can get through sometimes. So keep an eye on him. I think he is a huge sleeper in this one. And then next up, you have Jack Kaiser from Notre Dame. Really like his game. I think he's a real good fit for the Rams. Again, would easily start, in my opinion. Really sound tackler, leader, has all the things that they look for in a Ram. Always making plays in coverage. He's instinctive. He's smart. I like Kaiser a lot. And look, I've seen the he can't cover takes on Twitter, and I recognize I'm late here and I'm new to the party watching all the linebackers. And don't worry, we'll have breakdowns of all these linebackers over time. But Jack Kaiser can absolutely help in coverage. Like, that is just, I don't understand that. Like, he's not a liability. I watched way too much at Notre Dame, and I watched what he was doing and how he just kept making plays in coverage. I think this guy is going to be an absolute stud. Now, everybody I mentioned is probably going before I would say the fourth round that I mentioned. And I don't think it's any different with this next guy, Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. Elite athlete, plays like his hair's on fire. I've also seen his liability in coverage, and then I watch him and I'm like, nope, that guy is going to have a career in the NFL. So Stutzman is another one, really fun to watch on film. Plays like a car crash. I can say that because I've been hit by a car before. I know what one looks like. But you look at him and he plays with this reckless abandon. And that, can be good. That can also be bad. He doesn't really get off his blocks as well as you would like, but man, he is still fun to watch. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Blake Cashman. Not as good of a block shedder as Blake, but reminds me of Blake Cashman coming out of Minnesota. Just about the same athletic profile. Look out for him at Oklahoma. I think he goes, before the fourth round. I think all these guys are going to go before day 3. So we'll see if the Rams get one of them. Jeffrey Bassa from Oregon is a former defensive back convert. So we just talked about those. And now here's another one here. Good athlete. Watching him in coverage, he is good. Like, you can definitely see the safety background. And then, of course, what he can do in the run game. I think this is a guy that in a lot of respects has those block shedding tendencies that I look for. Could he go on day 2? Absolutely. I wouldn't be surprised if he fell into day 3. Feels like his stock is really high coming from the Senior Bowl and the Combine. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good athlete, right? And I feel like he's going to go. I think there's going to be a run on linebackers. Like, if we're looking at the linebacker signings, there are only about 3 guys that got big-time linebacker money. I think Bassa is going to be coveted, and I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up going, early or late day 2, early day 3. Then you have Kobe King, who is my brother's favorite linebacker. I got to say, my brother has been on the ball with some of these guys. I think he loves Fannin. He loves Kobe King. My brother Tyler, in case you don't know him, he's been on here before. Kobe King, okay? This is the deal. I totally get where he's coming from. As a matter of fact, I love him too, but I don't think he is a total fit with what the Rams are trying to do. And the reason being is because I think Kobe King, block shedding monster in the run game, probably the best block shedder of all the linebackers in this draft, but he really struggles in coverage. He's just not the athlete that these other guys are, but he's so strong, 6'1", 240. I think he could be a really great situational run defender. So with that said, I look at him as a guy that you draft with some of these guys. Like, if you go out and you get Chris Paul Jr. and you get Kobe King, or you go out and you get Carson and you get Kobe King, or you go out and you get Demetrius Knight and you add King, I think that's a banged up job for your draft class. Now, keep in mind, there have been teams that do things, like I mentioned, teams have different ideologies. And like the Ravens, for instance, I remember when they added Malik Harrison, and this was right after they drafted, I forget the linebacker they drafted. Was it Owe? They drafted Patrick Queen. So they draft Patrick Queen, right? So they draft Queen, and then they drafted Malik Harrison, who I think now are both on the Steelers. But that's not the point. The point being is they drafted Queen and they drafted Harrison. They got that insurance at linebacker. Now, we've seen this in the past, and it does work. It can be a little bit of a risk because, of course, if both of these guys hit and you have to pay both, you have to choose one or the other, puts yourself in a position where you're probably definitely going to lose at least one guy, if not both, to the free agency when their time is up. But at the same time, you can look at RG3 and Kirk Cousins as a great case at quarterback. When Washington drafted RG3 and traded up with the Rams to get all those picks, the Rams got all those picks to get RG3, they drafted Kirk Cousins later on in that draft. It's like Seattle, when they signed Matt Flynn, they still drafted Russell Wilson. I don't think they're sitting there today and saying, yeah, I wish we didn't draft Russell Wilson. We probably should have just let Matt Flynn play. No. So I like the insurance policy here because what you're essentially saying is that Kobe King is really effing good at one thing, but he really struggles at another. So at the very least, if he doesn't get better at that, even with NFL coaching, he has this. And this is good enough to help us in certain opportunities, in certain roles. So just because he doesn't have the other thing we're looking for, or he struggles in it, doesn't mean that the one thing that he is really good at isn't useful. Now, understandably so, he could get caught, on defense where it's a situational run, you put him in, and now teams are trying to throw it and take advantage. That's certainly true. But looking at the linebacker room currently, you could add two via the draft, especially if you don't sign anybody. And to me, I think Kobe King, because he doesn't have that coverage ability like the others do, he's going to fall down the draft. And I wouldn't be surprised if he falls into day 3. And if he's in the 5th round or 6th round or something like that, the Rams can absolutely get him. And if they get him and they get one of the guys I mentioned, I'm going to feel really good about that. Another guy that's really good, block shedding, really good as a run defender is Cody Simon, Ohio State, right? They really liked him there. He's a really good player. And another one that showed out to me was Branson Combs from Wake Forest. Now, I have not watched every single linebacker, but these are linebackers that really stood out to me, a lot of them. And Branson Combs, by the way, at Wake Forest, might not be your best run defender, might not end up being the highest pick, but I'm telling you, this guy is a baller, and he would be like my sleeper guy. I think he is going to have an impact at the next level. Branson Combs, you see his ability and coverage. That is just, it reminds me of one of the Lions linebackers. I believe he went to Oklahoma State, Malcolm Rodriguez. If he's just a coverage specialist linebacker, by all means, he's going to have a role in this league. I really like his game. I still think he could end up being a starter. Just because he's not elite at anything, he's not an elite athlete, whatever, doesn't mean he can't be coachable. He can't be coached up. A lot of these guys, too, just because I'm saying they don't have this or they have this or whatever, they can get better or they can get worse. The NFL has its way of evening itself out. Just because you're really good in college at one thing doesn't mean it's always going to translate to the NFL at another. I remember watching some of these prospects that have come and gone, and you're like sitting there and you're like, how on earth will this guy bust to the next level? And then he busts. And you're like, what? Well, the reality is when you get to the NFL, things change. Sometimes, guys slack off. They get that money. See, that's the thing. Back in the day, college, they didn't even have NIL. So these guys weren't getting paid anything. And now all of a sudden you're giving somebody who wasn't paid a dime, you're giving them $5 million with like a signing bonus and everything. And you're giving them that, but they're also, expected to, in return, give you production. And maybe they're stuck in their ways. Maybe they want to eat fast food. They don't want to, have a workout plan, a meal plan, whatever. They don't want to. They're not gym rats, right? This is where things like that, start standing out. It's why, for whatever reason, when people are like, yeah, why at like the combine are they poking and prodding these guys? Like, well, it's essentially you're marrying somebody, but you don't know anything about them, and you're trying to turn over every single rock before you decide to get married. That's what the NFL draft is all about. Albeit they only get 4 or 5 years, but until you can, of course, extend them. But I get, there's a lot of risk involved. And keep in mind, these marriages can make or break you, both as a, decision maker in an organization, but, just as an organization, right? So that's what I would say about that. I think there are a lot of players in this draft at the linebacker spot that has me feeling really good about this position. And like I said, I think Kobe King, if you could get him as a third linebacker, he's not going to be your starter because you have Omar Speights, but if you could get maybe he will. I'm saying that maybe they'll draft him anyway, but if you could get a really good coverage guy and then add Kobe King, I think that is the move. That is 100% the move. But there's also going to be guys that fall through the cracks in UDFA. Who knows? Branson Combs could be one of them. I don't think the Rams are going to miss a guy like that because he just balls out on tape. And they've been focusing more on drafting football players than drafting guys based on measurables. So, I don't think they're going to miss that. But let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. Again, this video was kind of just in a nutshell about the linebacker spot, kind of their ideology and how they look at things, regarding the linebacker spot, but also a highlight of how good Omar Speights is. What the free agents bring to the table, because I did, of course, watch film on them. And then these draft prospects that I think are underrated, because I'm hearing about this draft being really deep. I'm not hearing about this linebacker draft being great. And this linebacker draft is fantastic, in my opinion. I think it's got everything that you want. My worry is that the Rams don't draft one, and then there's a huge run on them, and they end up missing out on all the guys that I mentioned. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we've seen those runs before. So not having a second round pick, that could come back to hurt them. We'll see. Personally, right now, I think I would trade down. But if Jahad Campbell fell into my lap at 26, I still might take him. I don't know. I'm kind of in mixed feelings right now. Kind of like, let's see how the board goes. But check mark for the linebackers. And there are other guys I didn't mention. I didn't get a chance to watch a ton of them, but Barrett Carter from Clemson definitely is somebody. Teddy Buchanan from California. There are other linebackers that I did not list that are definitely worth looking into. But the point is the Rams are going to have a lot of options there in the draft, and I can see the vision now as to why they haven't signed anybody. We'll see if they do, but I definitely see the vision as to why they haven't signed anybody. I feel like if I know the Rams and know what they look for, Jahad Campbell is somebody that they will be high on, but I don't see them picking in the first round, and that's where you're going to have to pick them. And Demetrius Knight is somebody I really think they could pick. And Smile Mondin, I don't know. I would love it, but I don't know. If I had to put my money on, say, 5 guys out of this order, 5 guys that they would pick based on who they like normally at linebacker, who they've drafted in the past, I'd probably feel confident saying Demetrius Knight would be number 1. Number 2 would be Carson Swessinger. Number 3 would be Chris Paul Jr. Number 4 would be Jack Kaiser. And number 5 would be Jeffrey Bassa. I think those guys make the most sense based on what they have shown us that they like at linebacker. Of course, keep an eye on everybody. I'm not saying they couldn't draft Jahad Campbell. I'm just saying it seems unlikely based on their history. Danny Stutzman is somebody I could see, and I could also see Kobe King. I could see everybody on the list that I mentioned. It's not a super long list. It's only 11 names that I rattled off, but I could see it. So let me know in the comment section in below what you guys think, where you think they should go in the draft at linebacker or just in general. And I know a lot of people are talking about Jay Higgins. I watched Jay Higgins. I'm not overly blown away by him. I only watched one game, to be fair, so I didn't want to put him on this list because I watched way more than one game with these guys. But I can see what people mean with Higgins. I just feel like he's a little slow. So I don't know if that is going to be the move. Say what you will about the Rams. They may focus on UDFAs, but Christian Roseboom was like 4.5, 4.6 speed, and the play speed showed that. Omar Spates 4.6. Tony Fields is a good athlete. So they don't typically have guys that run like in the 4.8s, 4.9s, what have you. Now, do I care about 40 time? No. Do the Rams care about 40 time? Also no. They care about that GPS time. So they might actually like Jay Higgins. But I got to watch more of him before I actually make a full diagnosis, I guess, on him. So anyway, that's what I have for you guys. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. And if you want more of my content, be sure to check out, of course, The Lounge, where I had Cam Curl on my latest interview. So that's going to do it. You guys take care. I'll see you soon. Later, folks. All right, guys. So once again, just want to let you guys know that you can check out my new side project, The Lounge. I interview athletes, musicians, actors, actresses, all the nine. So definitely check it out over on the Lounge with Jake Ellenbogen channel. Be sure to subscribe and enjoy. In case you guys haven't noticed, I do have a Discord channel for my community on this channel. And if you want to be a part of it, it is free. The link is in the description below. You can sign up. This is basically a 24/7 Rams channel, and we are almost at 1,100 members. So if you want to be a part of it, just hit the link in the description below. Carson Swessinger, I might have butchered that name. Swessinger. I cannot say this guy's name. But anyway.